What we're going to be, just to get some background for those of you who I haven't met yet. My name is Maceo. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the founder of the ERG movement, which is an ERG development community space as well. I have led ERG programs at big companies, and I help ERG companies just to lean into the operational side of their ERGs and how to create sustainable ERGs in general. But the thing I'm most passionate about right now is the ERG movement, which is this next iteration of ERGs. Just for some context, ERGs have now been around for over 50 years. The first one started in the early 70s. So now that we're past this 50-year mark, it's time, it might even be past time, honestly, but it's definitely time to start looking at a new approach to how we do things with ERGs. And that's what the ERG movement is all about. It's the next iteration of what ERGs are and the impact that they can have. The ERG movement model, I also highly recommend that you all check it out. All of this is free on the ergmovement.com, where it's a new development model in terms of how to progress your ERG. So just something to take a look at. But in general, like I said, I nerd out about all things ERGs. I've spoken to hundreds of ERG leaders, and I'm excited to bring this information to you all today, talking specifically around the data. So before we get into it, something I always like to start off with is talking about the 3 guiding principles of the ERG movement. The reason why I do this, well, you all will see, because the third one is the one that really hits for today's conversation. The first principle is ERGs must operate like a business enterprise. It is a big concept. So like when you think of like operating a small business, there's a lot of moving pieces to that. And I think it can feel overwhelming, like, well, what does that mean for me? So that's some things that we cover within the ERG movement. The second principle of the ERG movement is ERGs must benefit both the members of the ERG and the business that it operates within. This is also big because currently a lot of people might really lean more so into the affinity group where they're saying we're just employee, like just connecting employees. Some ERGs, typically BRGs, lean heavily into the business side. Oh, we're driving commerce and things like that. But in today's modern age, an ERG has to do both. You have to have a community of people who are going to drive forward these business initiatives, but there also has to be a ROI, a return on investment for these ERGs as well. So that's principle number 2. The third one, though, is the one that we're really going to dive into more so today, where it's talking about if your program must have a strong foundation, long story short. Now, one of the quotes that you may have heard me say before, if you like keep up with the ERG movement, a stronger ERG program foundation is the key to unlocking the full potential of ERGs globally. Really, this strong foundation piece, unfortunately, is what has been missed by so many companies, especially if your company is in one of the categories of people who may have launched an ERG during 2020. We all know what was happening then, and it might have just almost been like in a rush. Let's just get these going, or maybe, well, typically that's kind of the situation, or it's more grassroots. I'll say that, where we're really letting the employees lead how this is going to be held. But when that happens, 9 times out of 10, this foundation is missing. So, what are the components of a strong foundation? I'll just say I'll be talking a little fast, so just know all of this information is on the ERG movement for free. So just check it out. But in short, there's 5 components to a strong foundation. You start off with the listening. You get some quantitative and qualitative learnings from the ERG members, from the executives, even from the potential new leaders, but you learn from others what they want to see out of an ERG program. This is big because that's going to help you get the buy-in from them to engage, but you have to ask them, especially with executives, how could an ERG program really help to push forward what you're doing or your department, your region? From there, you take these learnings that you get, you put them together and you create the program vision. Vision is thing number 2 that's part of the foundation. That's the big goal. Where are we trying to get our program to? What is the ideal state of our ERG program? You outline that. Next is the strategy. That's what's going to tell you how you're going to get to that goal from where you're at currently. So it's going to walk backwards with the timeline, with milestones in terms of how you're going to reach that goal. Thing number 4 is the structure, the SOPs. That is your ERG leadership structure. So having consistent amounts of ERG leaders across the ERGs in your company, having clear ERG roles. Lola was even saying succession, like that's all part of it as well. You have to have SOPs, standardized operating procedures. This is still all within the structure piece, but I talk about those a lot. You need step-by-step guides for each role that exists on how they're going to execute on their role. It's not just people getting in a position, but it's now they're here, they're in this role, make it really easy for them to be able to execute on it. And the last thing that we're going to talk about today is data. That's the last piece of the foundation that is essential. And unfortunately, a lot of people are operating without it, but I'll tell you, it has to be part of the program's foundation because it's going to be way harder. I mean, unfortunately, how do I want to say this? A lot of people that are even here today, obviously your ERG programs are already running. And even now it's going to be harder for you to incorporate it at this stage than it would have been for you to start it off. But it's not impossible. And we're going to talk about how you can easily incorporate that. So to get started, we're going to start with an activity, and I'm going to turn it over to Stephen so that he can kick us off. But what you are going to do, well, actually, I'm just going to kick it over to you, Stephen.
Again, this is gaining perspectives. We're going to be polling some questions around these, and this helps us to break down who is responding and what does the response speak to.
First question is, how much data is incorporated into your ERG program? So it's everything. You guys are killing it. We have a lot of data. We're improving. We have a little bit of data. Or last one is, it's non-existent. We're still, working on the first step kind of thing.
Exactly where I expected people to fall, but not in a shady type of way. I'm happy that all of us are truly no shade at all. I'm happy that we're all on the same page in terms of there's still progress largely. Now, shout out to whoever said it's everything, because we're definitely on the same wavelength for sure. But in general, there's work to be done. But the goal is to simplify at least where to start today. So that's perfect. Thanks, Stephen. There's going to be 2 more questions. So keep that link open for, for the future questions. I'm
going to pass it back over to you.
Perfect. I can get started anyway while you start doing that. But in general, let's just talk about the importance of data. And so with data, one thing I always like to say is, leading an ERG program, being an ERG leader without data, it's like flying a plane over the ocean with no gauges and no end destination. It is almost destined for, I can't even say, I don't want to say it's destined for failure because it sounds harsh, but truly, just like if you're flying over the ocean, you need coordinates. You need to know, where are we going to land this thing? Same thing with data, and even that vision that we talked about earlier. You have to have the metrics that say this means that our program is successful where it currently is, or where it will be. Once we hit that number, that means that it's successful. If you don't have that data and you're not tracking the supporting data that tells you, oh, we're on track to get there. We're on track to get there on time. We're making progressive steps towards it. So that's almost like those gauges. You don't have like the speed, you don't have the navigation, the compass, that's the word I'm looking for. So that's why I really value data. And like I said, it's something that, as long as we acknowledge, they say like admitting is the first step. So once you acknowledge that we have room to improve, that's when we can actually start making some improvements, long story short. Some other things that data also provides, it helps to clarify your role. So now it's no longer, oh, I'm the events lead, but now it's, okay, this is the metric that I'm accountable for as an events lead. This helps me to understand what I'm doing here as a voluntary role who doesn't have that much time to expend to extracurricular things anyway, but now I have that clarity. It also gives me that direction. So now I can know if I'm on track to move the needle on this specific metric or not. So that's big. I said accountability a little bit too. So right now there might be a situation within the ERG where everyone just does a little bit of everything. We all contribute where we can, or now someone is specifically accountable for a specific metric. That people say it's big in like the business development world, but if more than one person is responsible for a specific metric, it's almost like no one is responsible for that metric. So this gives the accountability for people to own it with motivation. So now you understand what you're doing. So that's exciting, yes. But then even now you're saying, okay, so if I move the needle on this metric, I can use that on my performance review. That's something tangible I can take away from this. And when I tell you all, this makes such a huge difference. I know so many ERG leaders that now that they are accountable for metrics and they use this even beyond performance reviews in their resumes. Obviously, I wouldn't like pitch that at the company because that's not, but I know people who have used that in their resumes and they've gotten into much better paying jobs, myself included. That's one of the things I definitely attribute my career growth to, is being able to use the metrics to articulate the impact that I'm bringing. And I just had 2 ERG leaders at our company who just had the same exact situation. So that's why I'm a really big fan of the data in general. But without it, it's almost like I said, if you're flying a plane, you're going fast, but it's almost like they say you're going nowhere fast. I don't mean that in a harsh way either, but it's just like the reality of you have to have the metrics. I think we're on the same page though. I think we all understand kind of what I'm getting at here. So what we're going to talk about for the rest of our time, our brief time together, is the basics that you need to know when it comes with starting to incorporate data within your ERG, and then the 5 things that you'll need to get started. Okay, so for the basic things, let's start with the input and output metrics. It's important to know the difference between the two. If you've been following me, I've been talking about this a lot recently. The difference between input and output metrics. Input metrics is what it sounds like. It's what you put into the ERG. It is the thing that you can control. Sorry, I just have to move you all around here so I can see. Okay, so it's the things that you all can control. It's the actions that you took. The output metrics is the result of that. The reason I bring that up is because a lot of ERGs are currently only measuring output metrics. If they are measuring something, they're only measuring the result of an action. What's wrong with that? Well, then it's very reactionary. It's saying, okay, this is the result, but you're not being proactive and saying, okay, how can we contribute? How can we change what we're doing to change the result? I hope that makes sense. Let me just see, can I get like a 1 in the chat if we're on the same page with what I'm saying here with input and output metrics? Okay, I'm seeing some comments. Good stuff. Okay, that's very important to know. Like I said, once you get to that point of starting to implement data, it's good to have both. I'm not saying that you shouldn't measure output metrics, because that's important too. But even then, it's good to understand what you all are doing to get that result. Okay, I think that makes sense. An example of that, however, would be, for instance, with an events lead, an output metric. Obvious when you think of number of attendees, the watch time percentage, the engagement by department potentially, or even a new one that I've been looking at is event engagement score. I don't even have time to go into that today, but those are output metrics. Some input metrics from an events lead specifically would be, how many days in advance did you send the invite out? That's a metric that you can measure, and it's going to have a direct correlation with that output metric, because if you send it out 2 days in advance, I can almost guarantee you're going to get a lot less engagement than you would if you sent it out 2 weeks in advance. And that is a metric that you can actually have documented and visualized so that people can follow. Another one would even just be who is getting invited. An input metric is them saying, okay, we're going to change who we're inviting to this event, and that's going to change the engagement from that department. That's thing 1, input and output metrics. There's a bonus one too, but for now, we're just going to talk about these 3. Thing 2 is to use what you've got and what you're ready for. If I'm being honest, a lot of ERG leaders, they feel stuck when it comes to data, because they're like, we don't have access to the stuff that we need, when really 9 times out of 10, what you're looking for as an ERG leader, it might be like the D&I data or the connection between a specific dimension of someone's identity and like the retention rate, when you might not be ready for that kind of data. And honestly, it's kind of gatekept from the ERG leaders because that team doesn't feel like they're ready to handle that kind of data. Now, how you can prove that is by using what data is already at your fingertips. And that's the 5 things that we're going to cover in terms of what is available for you all. But that's really important that you all use what you've got. Once you prove that you are able to handle that data responsibly, make good decisions from it, create a strategy to impact those numbers. That is what's going to make it so that those teams are that much more comfortable to partner with you all and give you all access to that other data in the future. The third thing is data visualization. that is really how you bring the data to life. You don't want it to just live on Google Sheets or an Excel doc. You want to make it make sense. The visualization, I like to say, is the storytelling component of the data. So it's now just taking just these numbers and creating something that someone can look at and they can understand the state of your ERG. Anything, I have to kind of rush through this because like time is going so fast. We'll kind of leave it at that, but when it's visualized, it's also really important because that's going to help you to identify those trends a lot quicker. So to be able to see, oh, that's the organization that's not engaged, or maybe people from this tenure, like the new employees, they're not coming to our events. Is there something wrong with our onboarding system where they're not seeing that our ERGs that we have ERGs? So that's where you can identify trends and opportunities. So that's why it's really important to have it visualized. I had to just kind of throw this together to give you all something to look at. Based on tenure, if you could see the top engaged employees, or even be able to look by location and say, oh, wow, look, our EMEA region is not as engaged as the US by far, which is 9 times out of 10, let's be honest, that's the situation. So this is an example of what the type of data you could have with these 5 sources. This is very possible. I am not a data analytics expert. I went from support agent, no type of expertise on Excel things at all. So we're just going to go really quickly into what these 5 things are. Thing 1 is the members list. I think I can actually turn it to you, Stephen, for this question number 2, and I'll just kind of talk through it at the same time. So with the members list, typically this is measured in different ways, maybe sometimes in more than one way. So maybe you're measuring your members in Slack. Are you measuring it in a distribution list, in a form? How are you all currently measuring your membership? You can add it to this Uni tool. Is super cool. I'm really excited to see how everyone is currently measuring their membership. And I'll just speak through it at the same time. So just know that you can get a list of your membership list. And right now, I mean, there's people who are in multiple ERGs, but when you have this list, you're able to combine it and see who is in, like the intersectionality there. How many people are likely to subscribe to more than one ERG? And is there a trend between what department they're in and them being engaged in more than one ERG? So having that member list is really big. Okay, we have a few. If you have something else, put it in the chat. I'm really excited to see. So that's thing 1, you need your member list. Thing 2 is you need your event data. So if you're using Zoom, you can pull your Zoom reports, guaranteed. Same thing with Teams, you can pull your Teams reports. It's going to tell you not just how many people attended the event, which a lot of ERGs are doing now. Oh, we had 20 people. No, now you can see exactly how many people, even if it wasn't at the same time. So now really you thought you had 20, but you really had 30. Some people just hopped off early. It also will tell you how long they stayed on. That's really big for watch time, especially if you're not doing an NPS survey after every event. I almost like watch time even better, because if they really like your event, they're going to stay for the entire time. Or, things happen, but that's just a good principle to go with. So that's another one that I really like. Google Meet also has this function, but you have to do something in the settings to allow that to be possible. Just a heads up. It's not something like Zoom and Teams where you can retroactively just go back and get it. So just a heads up if you have Google Meet. But just imagine being able to look at your events no longer just on how many people attended, but the percent, how long did they stay on? To be able to see this visualized here is like for this inner circle, the percentage of people. So the outer circle is the percentage of people in your ERG and like where they come from. And this is the meeting attendance for the inner circle. So you're seeing that the US mainly attends the event, even though they don't make up that much of the ERG. So now we have to start doing things in different time zones. So these type of things, learnings come from events. Channel engagement data, that's another big piece. If you use Slack or Teams, this is huge. Getting it into percentages is another thing. I have an article on what Slack engagement scores and what Slack active membership scores are. I'm calling them now channel active membership scores. But anyway, you can see the ebbs and flows week over. That's a big one. If you have a software that you're using, you can also ask for this data. Definitely do if you haven't already, because you should already have access to it. Project participants. So if you do any surveys, if you ask for volunteers for something, you want to have a list of who actually engaged, because not everyone's going to come to an event. Not everyone's going to participate in Slack, but they should not be counted in your ERG's engagement. So you need to make a list of that as well. And the last thing is that HRIS export. What is an HRIS? It is your human resource information system. So if you use Workday, Bamboo, UKG, you can ask for it. I know I'm going through a lot and I'm out of time. So I will just tell you, this is only like a preview to a longer conversation that I'm having at the end of this month on this. So if you're interested in being part of that conversation, DM me on LinkedIn, data, and I will get you all that link over so that you can attend, where I'm going to give you all the templates that I use to get this data, just everything, because I'm excited to see more people use this information and have these type of dashboards.
So Maceo, she's the ERG program manager. Can you talk about your day job?
Yeah, I lead the ERG program at Open Table and Kayak. A lot of people don't know their sister companies. So I'm now the senior ERG program manager as of earlier this week. Thank you.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Yeah, no, I think we need to plug that in, because that's what a lot of times, people think, when you think about some of these things that you need to start with, people think of consultants, like big money. Now, there will be a time for that, depending on the size of your companies. But the reason why I love bringing ERG leaders or ERG program managers is these are people that are doing it. They are doing it every day at their company, and budget is always a problem, but data is one of the things that you need data to get more budget. So you have to start with what you have so that you can show. Unfortunately, a lot of leaders still need to see that data, to see the things that you're talking about so that they can get it, so that they can fund the ERG operation. So thank you so much, Maceo. She has a Slack group can you drop the link to the Slack or the ERG movement page, where there's a lot more engagement also happening every week. She has a ton of resources there. One of the biggest ones that I absolutely love is the Idea Hub, where I get a lot of people reach out to me. We're trying to figure out programs. What kind of program can I run with my ERG? Maceo is curating this list of what companies have done, what ERGs have done. This can trigger some ideas for you and your ERGs, because these programs are very specific to the different types of ERGs. And I love the way it's tied up to the company, the business, right? So sometimes just being in a spot like that, where you're seeing different things, you get ideas for your ERGs. And I know Maceo always say, reach out, but there's only so many people you can reach out to. So thank you for curating some of these resources and making it available for everybody on Slack.